Los, komm, den Diesel!
I remember vividly how it felt the first time I watched Das Boot. My throat went dry. My chest felt unbearably heavy, as if I myself were trapped in the depths of the sea. The metal corridors were so narrow that shoulders brushed against shoulders. Bunks hung directly above the machinery. Jürgen Prochnow stood in the control room, drenched his eyes, exhausted yet forbidden to collapse. Erwin Leder's Johann trembled in the engine room, hands gripping the pipes as if clinging to life itself. When the film ended, I believed I had just seen the most realistic submarine movie ever made. And then, only when I began digging into the behind-the-scenes stories did I realise, shocked, that Das Boot was never merely a film that was acted. A set designed like a sealed prison, to the point that one actor suffered a genuine panic breakdown and lived with psychological complications for the rest of his life. A production that reactivated wartime memories, leading to a personal tragedy for a former U-boat commander after he watched the film, and a secret psychological study that documented the actor's mental collapse then was permanently sealed. And below are 20 of the strangest, most shocking and darkest facts behind Das Boot. Leave a heart before opening what will make you look at this film with entirely different eyes. 20. A director who demanded real endurance.
Du, die Salatkisten da hinten raus, doch kein Gemüseladen! Die Gefechtsstation. Werk- und Lagerhalle für die Torpedos, hä? Na, steht mal bitte stramm, Jungs! Hier kommt in die Zeitung! Danke, meine Herren. So, dann kommen Sie mal mit.
There is a dangerous belief in cinema. The more painful it is, the more authentic it becomes. For Wolfgang Petersen, this wasn't a slogan, it was a working method. From the outset, he imposed what he called the real submarine rule. If sailors in 1941 had to endure it, then the actors had to endure exactly the same. Peterson banned deodorant to preserve historically accurate body odour. He restricted bathing. Each person was allowed to shower only once every 4 days, mirroring wartime submarine hygiene. Diet was tightly controlled as well. No special meals, no nutritional supplements. Only canned meat, stale bread, and grain coffee, the exact rations of real sailors. After 3 months, many actors lost over 20 pounds. Jürgen Prochnow, who played the captain, dropped from 185 to 158 pounds. His face hollowed out. His eyes sank deep. His skin turned pale and ashen. No makeup, no tricks. That was real exhaustion. When actors complained, Peterson answered simply, "You're actors. This is the job. Either endure it for real or leave." But no one left. The German film industry at the time was small and insular. Walking away from Peterson was almost a career death sentence. So they stayed. And that endurance day after day etched itself into the very faces audiences would later praise as great performances. 19. Depth charge scenes caused real injuries.
Maschine, langsamer Fahrzeug. Maschine, langsamer Fahrzeug. Maschine, macht langsamer Fahrzeug. Wasserbomben!
Do you remember the depth charge scenes in Das Boot? No music, no heroic fanfare, just flickering lights, shuddering metal, and human bodies thrown around like broken puppets? The first time I watched them, I thought it was flawless staging. But much of what you see was real accident. The depth charge scenes were shot inside the cramped interior set using real explosives calculated to be non-lethal but strong enough to look like hell. In March 1980, during the first major shoot, one charge detonated early. 3 actors were hurled into metal walls. Klaus Vennemann, who played the chief engineer, smashed his head against a pipe, tearing it open so badly he needed 12 stitches. Blood streamed down his face and the camera kept rolling. The shot of the chief engineer, staggering blood-soaked in the film, is taken directly from that moment. Vennemann received brief first aid and was then asked to continue filming for another 6 hours. Insurance covered the hospital bills, but there was no compensation for the concussion that left him with headaches for months. During the depth charge scenes, Erwin Leder. Johann also panicked for real. The space was too tight, the light too dim, the explosions sudden. His vacant stares and clumsy reactions weren't entirely acting. They were survival reflexes kept in the film because they were too real. At the time, no one called this abuse. They called it realistic cinema. 18. The historical consultant who knew too much. One man walked onto the Das Boot set and immediately realized he was stepping back into hell. It was Heinrich Lehmann Willenbrock, the former commander who had captained U-96 on its 1941 patrol, the very submarine that inspired the story. When he visited the set in early 1980, Willenbrock spent 4 hours inspecting every detail. He checked valve positions, tested the torpedo loading mechanisms, sat in the captain's chair. Everything was accurate to a painful degree. Finally, he turned to Peterson and said 3 short words. "This is hell." It was both praise and warning. The reconstruction was so precise that it reactivated wartime trauma. Peterson asked him to stay on as a long-term advisor. Willenbrock refused. He told the production manager that watching actors reenact what he had survived was more terrifying than the combat memories themselves. He left the set and never returned. Years later, Willenbrock admitted he had nightmares about the set for months. To him, Das Boot was not a film. It was a door reopening the past. 17. Jan Fedder's accident, when the storm stopped being acting.
Das ist Thomsen! Thomsen! Beide Maschinenhalme zurück! Das ist Thomsen! Mensch, Thomsen!
The storm scenes in Das Boot are unforgettable waves smashing into the conning tower, men clinging to metal as if to their last grip on life. Watching them, you assume everything is controlled. For Jan Fedder, that illusion collapsed completely. During one shoot, Fedder was standing on the conning tower of the submarine model when the artificial wave system suddenly released a surge far stronger than planned. The impact knocked him off balance and slammed him hard onto a solid surface. Fedder suffered broken ribs and a concussion, serious injuries with nothing theatrical about them. The chilling part was the initial reaction. Wolfgang Petersen, behind the camera, thought it was brilliant acting. He shouted, "Great Jan! Let's do it again!" Only when the crew rushed in and the cameras were shut down did everyone realise it was a real accident. And true to Das Boot's filmmaking ethos, those moments of Fedder's real pain remained in the final cut. Not out of cruelty, but because truth, however dangerous, was always placed above safety. 16. The submarine that became a prison. I used to think the suffocating feeling in Das Boot came from camera technique, tight framing, red light compositions that deny both characters and viewers room to breathe. The truth was simpler. Nothing was fake. Production designer Ralph Zahit Bauer built a real submarine. At Bavaria Studios, 2 full-scale replicas were constructed, one exterior and one completely sealed interior where the crew worked for 11 months. The interior matched a Type 7 submarine exactly 50 metres long, 4 metres at its widest narrowing to less than 2 metres in places. Inside that space, 51 people worked up to 18 hours a day. No windows, no natural light. Fresh air came only from minimal ventilation, enough to survive, not enough to be comfortable. During depth charge scenes, temperatures fluctuated wildly. Leaks from the water tank above pushed humidity close to 90%. Within weeks, mould grew on the walls. The stench thickened into a mix of sweat, diesel oil, and rotting materials. Production assistants felt nauseous after minutes inside. The actors lived there for months. At that point, it was no longer a film set, it was a metal prison unlocked but with no escape. 15. Peterson's secret psychological study. As Das Boot progresses, the characters don't just grow tired, they fracture. Sudden irritability, long silences, eyes avoiding one another. I once thought this was subtle acting. The truth is darker. The breakdown was measured. Before filming began, Wolfgang Petersen hired Hans Müller, a psychologist from the University of Munich, to design a study on prolonged confinement and group dynamics. All actors underwent psychological evaluations before shooting, then weekly assessments for stress, depression, anxiety, and conflict. They were told it was routine health monitoring. None knew they were research subjects. A confidential report delivered to Peterson in January 1981 revealed alarming figures. 68% showed signs of clinical depression, 43% stress levels comparable to combat veterans, and 27% exhibited PTSD symptoms despite never having seen real combat. Peterson read the report and did not stop filming. He increased working hours. His reasoning was cold. If the actors were psychologically damaged, the performances would be more authentic. The study was never published. It was sealed in the Bavaria Studios archives like evidence cinema would rather never confront. 14. Scenes that used real corpses. There is a scene in Das Boot that makes everyone shudder. Nameless bodies floating on the water's surface, silent with no background music. Watching it, I assumed they were exceptionally well-made mannequins. The truth is, not all of them were fake. For wide shots, the crew used dummies. But for close-ups, Peterson wanted it to feel more real. Through connections with a medical school, the production was permitted to use bodies donated for scientific research. 4 real corpses were brought to a water tank, dressed in wartime German naval uniforms, and set adrift. The actors were not informed. They only found out after filming wrapped when Jürgen Prochnow realized that the body he had pulled closer on camera was not a prop. He confronted Peterson directly. The reply was brief: "Rubber doesn't look like death." The crew was forbidden to speak publicly about the matter under threat of legal action. The scene remained in the final cut. The German Medical Ethics Council later investigated, but found no legal violation since the bodies had been donated for educational purposes. The only unanswered question was whether cinema can be considered education or merely a way to legitimize crossing a line. 13. Mold outbreak sent the crew to the hospital.
Mensch, rammel dir doch einen Korken in den Arsch. Alte Sau.
At a certain point in Das Boot, everything looks dirtier, darker, more suffocating. On screen, it feels like deliberate atmosphere. In reality, the decay was real. By the 5th month of filming, poor ventilation combined with high humidity, sweat and confined space had turned the set into a biological hazard. Black mold began spreading across walls and metal surfaces. Actors developed similar symptoms: chronic coughing, shortness of breath, skin rashes, and prolonged exhaustion. At first, the production doctor dismissed it. But in August 1980, 7 actors were hospitalized simultaneously with severe respiratory infections. Environmental tests revealed dangerously high levels of toxic mold. Health inspectors recommended halting production and fully disinfecting the set. Peterson refused. He ordered only the visible mold to be wiped away and installed additional fans. The core contamination remained. Actors were required to sign health liability waivers to continue working. 3 refused to return. They were replaced within 48 hours and never mentioned again. Filming continued in a space everyone knew was making people sick, but where no one had the authority to stop it. 12. The Peterson suicide no one ever talks about. Some behind-the-scenes stories never make it into books or interviews. and surface only after silence has lasted too long. The case of Carl Friedrich Mertin is one of them. In March 1983, 18 months after Das Boot premiered, Mertin, a former U-boat officer who had served in the war and acted as an unofficial advisor on the film, was found dead in his Hamburg apartment. In his suicide note, he explicitly mentioned the movie. Watching the recreated submarine warfare scenes had dredged up decades suppressed memories burning oil on the water's surface, the screams of comrades in flooded compartments, and the helplessness of being unable to save anyone. Wolfgang Petersen was informed of the death. He made no public statement. Production records show that he sent a private condolence letter to Mertin's family, and both sides agreed to keep the matter confidential. The German press did not report it. The incident vanished into silence. Peterson died in 2022, never publicly acknowledging that his pursuit of authenticity may have helped reopen wounds that never healed. 11. The panic that didn't end when the camera stopped. Watching Das Boot, you may notice something unsettling. The characters never seem to leave the space they occupy. They squeeze past each other, collide, move cautiously. Later, it becomes clear this wasn't artistic intent. It was the reality of the set. The submarine interior design completely isolated the rear compartment. The only exit was a nearly 50-metre-long, extremely narrow metal corridor, often blocked by cameras, lights and crew. For actors in the stern, getting out depended entirely on whether the crew could clear a path in time. In December 1980, while filming in the rear engine room, Jan Fedder suffered a severe claustrophobic panic attack. Realising he was trapped deep inside the hull with no quick exit, he lost control and screamed to be let out. But the passage ahead was fully blocked. It took 17 minutes to clear the equipment and open a path for Fedder to crawl out. Wolfgang Petersen did not stop the cameras. The real panic attack remained in the film. After the incident, Fedder developed severe claustrophobia, requiring years of treatment and leaving him unable to use elevators. For him, Das Boot was not just a role, it was a memory he could never escape. 10. The water tank disaster no one talks about. Among the accidents on Das Boot, one incident is rarely mentioned despite nearly costing lives: the water tank disaster. To film diving and surfacing sequences, the crew built a 30-metre-long tank holding up to 500,000 litres of water, enough to submerge the exterior submarine model. In July 1980, during an urgent shoot, the pump system malfunctioned. Instead of flooding over the planned 45 seconds, the entire volume of water crashed in within less than 20. 4 actors were standing on the conning tower. The force of the water knocked 2 of them off the vessel. One surfaced immediately. The other, supporting actor Ralf Richter, remained submerged for nearly 30 seconds. When divers pulled him out, he was unconscious and had to be resuscitated on the spot. Footage from the real accident appears in the film. Richter survived but later suffered recurring nightmares of drowning. Once again, Das Boot kept the real moment too authentic to discard. 9. The ending that split a nation. Very few films dare to end the way Das Boot does. After 3 hours of endurance, the submarine finally reaches La Rochelle. The characters survive. The audience barely has time to exhale. Then an air raid hits. Everyone dies on the dock instantly and meaninglessly. When the film premiered in West Germany in September 1981, the ending tore public opinion in two. One side saw it as a merciless anti-war statement where survival itself holds no meaning. The other argued it insulted German soldiers who had truly suffered. The divide quickly turned political. The left praised the film for humanizing German soldiers. The right condemned it for the same reason. The debate reached Parliament where lawmakers questioned whether public funds should support a film that made audiences empathise with the German military. Wolfgang Petersen received death threats from both sides. He offered no explanation. He chose silence, allowing the ending to remain controversial to this day. 8. When the premiere turned into a riot. The premiere of Das Boot at the Berlin Film Festival in February 1982 quickly spilled beyond cinema. Outside the theatre, anti-fascist protesters gathered chanting accusations that the film glorified the Nazi German military. Inside the audience included real former U-boat sailors, some still wearing old uniforms. When the film ended, applause erupted. The crowd outside heard it and tried to force their way in. Police sealed off the building, bottles were thrown, tear gas was used. The reception was cancelled and the film crew was evacuated through a back exit. Jürgen Prochnow's car was recognised and had its windows smashed. The incident became international news, eclipsing any artistic discussion. Peterson issued a statement condemning violence while defending his portrayal of German soldiers as human beings. It satisfied no one, and Das Boot officially entered public life as a film of endless controversy. 7. The score that broke a composer's career. The music of Das Boot doesn't sound like a war film score. It doesn't elevate emotion, it isn't heroic, and it isn't romantic. That was Peterson's explicit demand to Klaus Doldinger. Make it sound like a machine. Doldinger spent 8 months composing a score built on mechanical rhythm, industrial sounds, and minimal melody. He recorded it in an abandoned factory using real submarine equipment as percussion. When Peterson heard the finished work, he said one sentence, "Perfect." Then another, "Do it again from scratch. The reason the music was too good, it overshadowed the images." Doldinger spent 4 more months creating an even more stripped-down version. That is the score used in the film. But the relationship between the two men collapsed completely. They never worked together again. 6. The veteran who couldn't finish the film. A special screening in Hamburg was held exclusively for former U-boat sailors. In the audience was Otto Kretschmer, former commander of U-99, along with 12 surviving members of his crew. The first 30 minutes passed in silence. Then came the first depth charge attack. Kretschmer stood up and walked out, visibly trembling. 2 others followed. They were found outside the theatre. Kretschmer said only this: the film was too real. The suffocation and terror were recreated perfectly, but watching it as entertainment was unbearable. He gave just one interview about the experience. Das Boot is the most accurate submarine film ever made, and he will never watch it again. 5. The distribution war in the United States. When Columbia Pictures acquired the US distribution rights to Das Boot, they immediately faced a problem. American audiences had little interest in a 3-hour German film about submarine soldiers from the enemy side. The marketing solution was controversial. The campaign emphasized the anti-war message while minimizing anything German. Posters focused on the submarine itself, not the people. Trailers cut dialogue and amped up action. The strategy gave the film modest commercial success, but sparked fresh debate. German critics accused Columbia of erasing the film's national identity. In the US, some suspected the studio was quietly smuggling sympathy for the German military into theatres under an anti-war disguise. The result was a paradox. Das Boot could only succeed in America by hiding the fact that it was a film about German soldiers. 4. The director's cut. No one could sit through. The first cut of Das Boot ran 5 hours and 32 minutes. Its pacing was so slow It bordered on real time, deliberately forcing the audience to experience the waiting boredom and psychological erosion of submarine warfare. To Peterson, every frame was essential. Bavaria Studios disagreed. They demanded heavy cuts. No theatre would screen a film that long. Peterson fought fiercely, but ultimately spent 4 months cutting it down to 2 hours and 29 minutes for the theatrical release. He later described the process as amputating his own limbs. American distributors pushed to reduce it further to 2 hours. Peterson refused. The US release was delayed until a compromise was reached, keeping the 2-hour 29-minute version intact. 3. The edit that changed the film's moral history. One scene in Das Boot has always sparked controversy, the crew celebrating after sinking an Allied ship. In the theatrical cut, they cheer, embrace and sing. To some viewers, it plays like a celebration of a German military victory. What most audiences never knew is that the original cut didn't end with jubilation. The captain's face shifts from exhilaration to disgust. He retreats to his cabin, vomits, and writes in his log about the people who are likely drowning beneath the sea. That moment of moral reckoning was removed from the theatrical version. A single editorial decision was enough to blur the film's ethical stance, leaving it vulnerable to being read uncomfortably as propaganda. 2. The submarine replica that became a museum. After Das Boot wrapped, Bavaria Studios faced a practical problem. The full-scale submarine replica was too expensive to dismantle. The solution was to donate it to the German Maritime Museum in Bremerhaven, where it became a permanent exhibit. Today, visitors can walk through the same claustrophobic spaces the actors endured. What the museum does not advertise is that the replica was never fully decontaminated. The toxic mould that once sent cast members to the hospital was sealed over with paint, not completely removed. In 1995, museum staff began developing respiratory problems. Environmental tests identified the submarine replica as the primary source of contamination. The exhibit was closed for 6 months, with clean-up costs exceeding £200,000. When it reopened, visitors were advised to move through quickly due to poor ventilation. 1. The truth. Peterson never fully admitted. Throughout his life, Wolfgang Petersen maintained that Das Boot was an anti-war film that merely happened to tell the story of German sailors. This interpretation was accepted by critics and audiences for decades. After Petersen's death in 2022, newly released personal documents revealed a letter he wrote to Lothar Günther Buchheim in August 1979. In it, Peterson stated that he wanted Germans to look back at history without shame and without pride, only truth. He did not deny Nazi crimes, but sought to separate ordinary soldiers from the ideology that used them. This suggests that Das Boot is not only an anti-war film, but also an attempt to restore dignity to ordinary military service. That ambiguity is precisely what keeps the film alive, as an unresolved argument does empathy weaken the concept of collective guilt. After everything that is now known, Das Boot is no longer just a submarine film. It is a reconstructed collective memory built from real suffering and real people who paid a price beyond the frame. The most unsettling thing about Das Boot is not the depth charges, or the darkness. It lies in the question the film leaves behind, one with no clear answer. Is empathizing with people in the enemy's uniform the first step toward forgetting history? Or is it the only way to understand how war destroys human beings, regardless of which side they are on? What do you think? Share your view in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you don't miss future videos.